As you say, you've read Countdown, so you are well aware of the voluminous scientific study of this subject and the plummeting sperm rates across the world. But in addition to those types of chemical toxins, I am interested to see you also addressed psychological toxins that are invading people's minds and perhaps preventing them from being fertile. Talk about the concept of psychological toxins and why you included that in this.
Yeah, well, another one that you kind of inspired me to think of. I mean, I had already been thinking about how the anti-human propaganda of people being afraid to have children because they think humans are like a disease on the planet. That's kind of a psychological virus that's changing people's perspectives. Like you said, the most insidious part of this whole depopulation agenda is convincing people to depopulate themselves. So there's other variables I thought about that are also influencing people's either family dynamics or their willingness and interest in having children. I characterize those as psychological toxins. So I put a little section in the article there, and I listed a few that I could think of. I'm sure there's more. But one of the main ones that came up, because I was looking at your excellent post on the Amazonian tribe gets Starlink internet, and I came across that part that described pornography as a neurological weapon. And I thought about that in the context of relationships and families, and how there's so many people that when they get hooked into this stimulus, it's really damaging their ability to start a family. So I did a little write-up on there, and there actually turns out that there's some studies on the biological effects as well, for both males and females, that it's going to damage the biological function of fertility. But the psychological variable is that, people that are into that stimulus, they're less likely to have a stable relationship, a healthy relationship that's going to result in a marriage. And as you pointed out in your article, marriage is a huge factor for women being willing to and wanting to have children. So that is a trickle-down effect, that once you start that domino of people being hooked into that stimulus, they're a lot less likely later in life to have a family. And the way that they're kind of grooming kids with these social medias like TikTok, and they're introducing them to this kind of content, it seems like a kind of intentional thing in that context where it's crippling people's ability to have a healthy relationship and a family. So I thought that's kind of a psychological toxin that's been introduced into the cultural framework that is doing that. And then aside from that, the anti-human misanthropic propaganda that conditions people to see humans as a cancer on the earth, that's creating like guilt and fear in people about starting a family, like I shouldn't because we're such a burden. And yeah, it's an artificially maintained form of self-loathing. It's self-destructive, and it's kind of an ultra slow motion form of multi-generational suicide, because people are less likely to want to have kids, and eventually, their cultures and their demographic is going down to zero. And then on the other side of things, I was watching an interview of yours that you did with Derek Burrows, and he was talking about how there's kind of, in some circles, when they figure out that the globalists are using all this greenwashing and trying to get people that care about nature to go on their side, people go on the opposite side and they go into this anti-nature kind of mentality, where they think anything that has to do with caring for the forests or the waters or anything to do with Earth is globalist related, and so they become kind of anti-nature. And I thought that in itself too is a kind of a psychological toxin, because in the end, when you start to see everything other than humans as just less than, and the earth as just something to be exploited, the end result of that is that you're going to damage the very ecosystems and the water and the food and everything that's helping your fertility in the first place. So down the line, you're feeding into a mentality and systems that are also going to damage your fertility biologically, and then, in other ways down the line. So I cover that too in there. And then lastly, but not leastly, statism. Statism is the religion that I would say is one of the most damaging psychological toxins for fertility, because the statist systems themselves, we know they've done eugenics operations where they're intentionally targeting certain demographics and trying to physically limit their ability to reproduce. But more than that, the statist systems themselves indoctrinate people into these other belief systems, whether it's the anti-human one, like in Canada. I'm sure that if you go look on the government, they're all saying there's too many humans and we got to do sustainable development and decrease the population. Or if it's more on the industrialist side of things, like let's say Trump and Musk are doing, where they're like, let's chop it all down and extract it all. And that also is, these are statist promoted mentalities that are eventually going to impact fertility and people's ability to access clean water and food. So, yeah, the status belief system and those other ones are psychological toxins that are injected into culture, and that over time are a kind of a slow motion decrease in fertility and the viability of cultures.
Well, there is no doubt that there is a huge psychological factor that is going on here. Yes, there are many different things that are happening here, but one of them is that psychological assault. And I have a lot to say about all of the topics that you're talking about there. So, in fact, in a sense, as I'm thinking about it, you're connecting the dot that I was thinking about the other day. At the base of the technocratic mindset that is obviously the flavor of eugenicism that's taking place in the 21st century is the idea that, going back perhaps to Heidegger, that the earth is, and all natural resources are standing reserve to be transformed into something useful for human productivity or something along those lines. And when we start to see the world as nothing other than resources that we can use to our advantage, then we start to literally shape our entire society around that. And that, I think, to me, is the basis of the technocratic mindset. But it's also the same mindset as the people who think of the earth as less than whatever, it's unimportant, it's only there for the resources of humanity. I think there is obviously a parallel there, and I think I want to draw that out in future work. But I think also it is incredibly important to join head on the battle against the Malthusian mentality, which, for me, it's always fascinating that when I write about this subject or talk about the declining birth rates and other such things, to see the demonic energy of some people who get extremely agitated about this. And why do you care so much about humanity? Why do you want more people on this planet? People are terrible. But I'm against the eugenicists and the elitists and everything. It's just, I believe everything they believe, and I hate humans too. It's a weird reaction. First of all, have you encountered that when you try to bring this information to people in your circles? And if so, how do you counter that?
Yeah, for sure. It's prolific. It's a kind of thing that's been infiltrated into people's minds, especially people that care about the earth, because of course the environmental, bright green environmentalism and the sustainable development thing are all promoting that. So people have been inculcated into this belief system that humans are inevitably an imposition on the earth. So when people come to me and they're saying these concerns about that, about human population, and saying that we should actively lower the population or shouldn't try to increase it, basically what I say is, like, if you're going to worry about increasing human fertility, look at how other cultures in the past have also increased the fertility of the land where they live while living. So there's examples, plenty of them all over the world, where people, even in growing populations, their culture had a specific ethos and a specific mentality with regards to nature, so that while they were also feeding themselves, they were feeding the earth. So if you're guilty and you're feeling bad about starting a family, increase your fertility while increasing the fertility of the earth where you live. And then your conscience can be clear, because there's clear examples, like I have a couple of them I scribbled down so I wouldn't forget. Like if you look in the Amazon rainforest, the terra preta, there was cultures there in the Amazon that over many, many generations, the way that they produced their soil, the way that they got rid of their waste, was to create these permanently enriched soil structures that they call terra preta, the black earth. And so their population was thriving, it was stable, and yet they were also building the biodiversity and the support of the forest around them. And we can see the results of that now with the amazing soil that's there. So that's one example. And then of course there's ancient food forests all over the globe. There's some that are in South America, there's some here in North America, aka Turtle Island, there's one in Morocco. I suspect there was some in ancient Ireland, which I covered in a post recently. So there's ways that humans can live and increase their resilience and their culture's thriving that also increases nature thriving. So that's my approach, is to see, to reframe this idea of humans as a disease and see that there's viable historical examples that we can build on. You don't have to emulate them and replicate them exactly, because there's certain contexts that aren't relevant anymore here. But you can take pieces that work, you can puzzle them together, and we can create a path forward where we're also enhancing the biodiversity of the earth while building families and building sustainable cultures. Yes. And then another example I had here was for people on the coast, there's examples of, because the ocean's being so aggressively pillaged, people say, well, what about the ocean? Well, there's regenerative aquaculture and mariculture. So some cultures actually built like estuaries in the tidal zones, and they increase the biodiversity through farming oysters, let's say, or clams or seaweed, creating an ecosystem for other beings while feeding themselves. So there's a lot of examples that we can build on, and that's my approach, is that humans can be a solution. The human hands that we've been conditioned to see as damaging can also be healing. We just need to reframe, and use our gifts for the good of the planet and ourselves as well.
I couldn't agree more. And now that I think about it, I think there is a kind of weird two sides of the same coin thing that's happening between people who are all in favor of environmental destruction, whatever it takes, just resources for humans, and the people who think, oh, humans are a cancer on the planet. They both kind of see humans as unnatural, as not part of the natural world in a way. Whereas, no, I think humans are part of this world. And yes, I agree. I think more humans finding ways to live in balance with nature is to the good. And I think it can be done. And I'm glad to see that at least some people are fighting through and breaking through that conditioning that I think we've all been subjected to. And that's very easy and lazy for the misanthropes and learned psychopaths out there to adopt. Having said that, if people are interested in increasing fertility, starting a family, here's an entire encyclopedia of information for you to start browsing through. And I hope people will do that. Once again, the name of this particular post is Fertility and Reproductive Health Enhancing Whole Foods and Naturally Occurring Compounds. And as I say, 26th post in the Stacking Functions in the Garden, Food, Forest, and Medicine cabinet. Can you tell us about some of the other 25 posts and what people might find there?
For sure. And just one more thing on the Malthusian variable is people, that have adopted this mentality, we need to lower the population. At its extreme, the Georgia Guidestones as an example. Even if we were to reduce our numbers of humans down to Georgia Guidestones numbers, in the age of robotics and automation, I would say that it's important to think that people could actually be living in their smart cities and bunkers while also destroying the earth even with tiny amounts of numbers. So it's not so much a matter of the amount of humans, but rather the humans' choices that we're making, the ethos that are driving our culture. So population isn't so much as whether we're using our gifts for good or not. But this series, so I started with plants that I know well and trees that I know well and some fungi that I know well, teaching people how to cultivate them, how to identify them in the forest and propagate them so that they're identifying abundance that's already around us and then building on it so they're not just extracting. So I covered a number of different species that are great for either residential gardening and regenerative gardening or for food forest design. And then from there I built on these different dietary lists that are helping maintain optimal human health. So I think I started with one because I had a couple friends that were really severely impacted by those mRNA injections. So I started with spike protein detox and cardio-regenerative foods. And so I provided some ways that nature can help us to heal that aspect, whether they're dealing with what I just mentioned or they just want to maintain optimal heart health. And then I went on to the osteoprotective and osteoregenerative, so we can maintain optimal bone health. And then also the eye health and the radioprotective foods, so protecting our bodies from radiation, whether that's ionizing radiation like you guys would have to deal with in Japan with all the mess they're creating there, or it's the non-ionizing radiation from these devices, the artificial EMFs. So I'm trying to give people a framework where they can tie their resilience right into the ground where they live, recognize the abundance all around them, and then let that resilience go right into their bodies to make them healthy so they can apply their unique gifts where they are and make their communities resilient, build those parallel societies you talk about, and we can resist while doing it joyfully and healthily.
Excellent. Well, as we talked about in your previous appearance on Solutions Watch, you also have a book on recipes for reciprocity. Tell people about that book and how they can get a copy.
Yeah, Recipes for Reciprocity is my first book. So it was, as I said in the other Solutions Watch, it was born of my want to connect on people to the earth in a reciprocal way while also being creative in the kitchen. And so that book I have on my website, recipesforreciprocity.com. And you can get physical copies as well as digital copies. And I like to slip in little heirloom seeds in with the book, so you'll often find when you open it up, you've got some medicinal herb seeds or some vegetable seeds in there to get you going to grow the ingredients for the recipes in the book, or just to make some great tea. And that book is my starting point. I do touch on food forest design in there a little bit, and then I'm building on that for my next book, which is going to be more scalable either from a residential scale or a community scale to build resilient multi-generational food systems. So the food system that would support a parallel society and that is able to be scaled as you need it, while also regenerating and enhancing biodiversity and nature around us.
Excellent stuff. All right, I'm looking forward to that next book, as I imagine a lot of people are. So in the meantime, recipesforreciprocity.com, gavinmouncey.substack.com, all of the links to everything that we've mentioned today will be in the show notes. Gavin Mouncey, thank you again for your time and for doing this incredibly laborious and detailed work.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
The next edition of Solutions Watch came on April 3rd, and it was called Enhancing Fertility Naturally. And again, I hope you have seen this edition of Solutions Watch, especially if you are planning on being fertile, being reproductive, but having difficulty with that. In this episode, I talked to Gavin Mouncey of recipesforreciprocity.com about a post that he made called Fertility and Reproductive Health, Enhancing Whole Foods and Naturally Occurring Compounds, where we talked about some of the natural ways to enhance fertility. Not only is the earth abundant, but it can also be your medicine cabinet. You do not need pharmaceuticals in order to enhance your fertility or deal with your internal health in a lot of different ways. And we had an extensive discussion about that. And I received this update from Gavin about this subject via email that I'd like to share with you. He writes, "The more I learn, the more I see how important regenerative gardening, creating food forests, and spending time in nature is for our health. Since writing the article on reproductive health in the spring, I've learned a lot more about how important being in natural settings, and in particular in forests, is for optimizing human reproductive health. Medicinal airborne molecules emitted by trees, especially old growth trees, impact the human immune system and reproductive health. The potential for the longevity and health of our human family is interconnected with these ancient forests. Our destiny is woven together with the fate of the forests by the Creator in many ways. We can either use our human gifts to strengthen and add beauty to that tapestry, or we can be guided by greed and begin to unravel the fabric that that Creator had put here to support us all in unlocking our true potential and being able to start families. Each choice will have profound implications." Turns out those tree huggers may have been onto something. I updated my article with pertinent information and studies. I hope this inspires you all to get out in nature more, to breathe in all the medicine forests provide, and protect those ancient forests that are left in your local region. If you want to hear James Evan Pilato and I explore the health benefits of specific foods and recipes that often contain reproductive health enhancing ingredients, check out the Mouncey Minute, which airs on the second Wednesday of each month at MediaMonarchy.com. Also, there is a sale going on for my book, which comes with seeds for growing several reproductive health-enhancing food/herbs, with wishing everyone a peaceful, joyful, and fertile holiday season. Thank you very much for that, Gavin. And he does include the link to that sale that is going on for his book. So I will include that in the show notes if you're interested in checking that out and supporting the work that Gavin is doing. At the very least, I hope you'll check out his Substack and that post that we're talking about in particular about natural ways to enhance your reproductive health. There is a lot of information, and it is an encyclopedic post. So I hope people will at least check that out.